wizards who are pumping out some of the most, and I mean most, exhilarating video content out there. You know, when you see a crazy scene like in a movie or a TV show and you ask, how did they do that? Well, I'm going to tell you, our panelists today are going to give you those answers. And I want you to know, late last year, I had a very special opportunity to go behind the scenes and experience what it was like to have my own image captured using volumetric video technology. It was truly amazing and eye-opening. At once it was captured, my image was replicated and transported to different environments with the movements controlled completely by software. So there I was, but then my image was taken and my image was completely controlled by software without a green screen. That's how we've always known it. Well, that's no more. Without wearing any special suit, don't need it, no more, or gear, as was done in the past. It was both thrilling and, I have to be honest with you, in some ways it's terrifying. Though volumetric video might seem like technology that's light years away, it's really available right now, and it's actually quite affordable for content producers to use over the technologies that produce similar effects, but actually sometimes with a little less accuracy. So volumetric video capture is here. It's important we have conversations about how this technology can be used to benefit our members and the guardrails that need to be established to protect against misuse and exploitation. So before we show you what's coming up, I just want to remind you, we're going to have this panel. If you want to ask questions, you can go and send your questions to sagaftra.org/summit questions. That's sagaftra.org/summit questions. So here's some footage from that experience. And what you're going to see here is a very basic application of the technology. Our panel of experts are going to share some more sophisticated examples of holographic technology in action, and then they're going to do a deep dive on the challenges and opportunities that this new technology presents. So let's just roll that video right now. So during this presentation, we're going to discuss volumetric capture and really how it enables the creation of digital human assets, otherwise known as human beings. It actually can create realistic holograms and look like true performances. Wild, right? What does that mean to you and me as actors and performers? Let's find out. Wow, that was something else, right? Again, I just want to remind you, it blows my mind to see it. Anyway, I just want to remind you, if you have questions that you want to direct to today's guest, please submit those questions to sagaftra.org/summit questions. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the discussion over to our moderator, Matthew Papish. Matthew is CEO of Immersive Talent Management and is a strategist for partnerships and business development for Samsung XR. Matthew, I thank you for being here. It's really nice to have you.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Thank you, everybody, and good morning and welcome. So as Victor Hugo wrote, nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. So imagine we're watching you in a movie, you're delivering a powerful scene, everyone's talking about it. But here's the thing, when they shot that scene, you weren't there. At the same time, you're standing in somebody's living room as if you're actually there as part of an extra hologram feature on a movie's DVD release. And I'll even take it one more. You're wrapping up a commercial in Europe and you never had to get on the plane. And one step further, you were actually compensated for all three of these hires. So how is this possible? Well, that's volumetric video and it's the future of entertainment. And in today's panel, we will unpack volumetric video capture. We'll learn how it's being used today, and we'll talk about current rules around reuse, consent, compensation, and as future use cases are firmed up. Just a little bit about me. As strategy and business development lead at Samsung XR, I first began to work with volumetric video. And as our engineers continued to develop the technology, it became apparent just how sophisticated and how accurately it was able to capture the volume of a person or an object in 3D. And while the capture technology was evolving, there was software that was able to alter and retarget body and facial movements after the person is actually scanned. So that began to unlock mind-blowing amounts of potential ways that these assets can be used and reused over time. However, I also knew that in order for this to become a legitimate tool and drive employment opportunities and have real income potential for performers, it needed to be organized and governed by rules that ensure protections and appropriate compensation. And as Gabrielle said at the top, in the right hands, volumetric video is a game changer. But without basic rights, it could be abused and it could be downright dangerous. So about a year ago, I reached out to the leadership team at SAG-AFTRA, and we began our collaboration, which leads up to today. So for today's panel, we pulled together a best-in-class group of experts working in and driving the space forward. We're also fortunate to have Duncan, Crabtree-Ireland, SAG-AFTRA's Chief Operating Officer and General Counsel, to help us get into the weeds. But before I introduce our panel, we prepared a sizzle reel that will demonstrate some of our work. But first, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge SAG-AFTRA's president, Gabrielle Carteres. It's really been a privilege to work alongside an organization like yours that's so willing to address new technologies, and one that believes so deeply in democracy and truth and has the courage to protect its members at all costs. So I speak for our panel, we want to thank you. So, okay, Aaron, let's roll the tape. Excellent. So please let me introduce you to our panel one by one. I'll ask them to briefly describe who they are and what they do. So Duncan Crabtree-Ireland is Chief Operating Officer and General Counsel at SAG-AFTRA. Duncan, welcome.
Thanks, Matthew. It's great to be here. I think this is going to be a fantastic panel. We're looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you. Piotr Uzarowicz is the Head of Partnerships and Marketing at Arcturus. Piotr, welcome.
Thanks very much, Matt. Appreciate it. And just in terms of a brief introduction, you got my title right. Absolutely. Arcturus developed Holosuite. It's really the world's first post-production platform for the editing and distribution of volumetric video. So think of us as Final Cut for volumetric video.
Thank you. Roe Lev is the Director of Business Development at Tetavi. Roe?
Thank you, Matt. Very excited to be here with you guys. We at Tetavi developed the world's first complete platform for immersive social entertainment.
Thank you. Irfan Merchant, or I'll just refer to you as Merchant, is the principal at Mobile Motion Mocap Studios.
Hi, everybody. We do motion capture, volumetric videos, XR, MR, AR, all the alphabet soup production in LA.
Thank you. And thank you. We're happy to have Wong, who is the Global Director, Emerging Technologies at The Mill. Welcome, Boo.
Hi, I'm so glad to be joining you guys. I love all your tech. And The Mill, you know, I would say we're the largest commercial production, post and creative tech studio serving the advertising industry today. We're also part of the Technicolor family. And, you know, I head up the strategy and the teams that work across interactive, advanced technology, virtual production, motion and vocab, AR, VR, all the R's. And I think a lot about the future production tools and the new platforms that we can use to create, view, and also experience the content. So super pleased to be having this conversation with you guys today.
Excellent. Well, welcome. Well, let's get right to it. So right up at the top, I want to start building a foundation of understanding for the audience about volumetric video capture and what makes it distinct. So Piotr, can you describe the differences between volumetric video capture and traditional techniques such as mocap and CGI?
Sure, I'll try. Briefly, I could start by saying that volumetric video is recording video in 3 dimensions. You're capturing that object in real time in 3 dimensions. So software algorithms, so imagine a studio in the round with any number of cameras from 3 to 150 recording you all at the same time from all of those angles in a room. Software algorithms then process that imagery to create a 3D animated model, but that's photoreal. It's actually you. It's not a cartoon version of you. It's a photoreal version of you. These holograms are then 3D, which are ideal for spatial experiences like in augmented or in virtual reality. But even more exciting, and I think perhaps what I think is more relevant to this particular audience, is that these possibilities expand the 2D medium, because they can be incorporated into virtual productions using real-time camera tracking and a variety of other 2D compositions in post for visual effects, or even so far as like adjusting a performance, a physical performance in post-production. So a variety of areas.
So just to follow up on that for a second, there's something out there called the uncanny valley. Can you explain what this is and maybe some examples? Sure.
We've seen a lot over the last few years of CGI recreations of actors. Princess Leia, we've seen Will Smith in Gemini Man. We've seen other versions, you know, and early on we saw Tom Hanks in the Polar Express. All of those are CGI representations. So they're animated versions of that actor. The uncanny valley refers to that even though we see Will Smith 20 years younger than he actually is, he still doesn't look quite real. There's something a little bit off about it, that it's very, very close to him, but there's just something that you can tell that isn't quite right. And that's the uncanny valley. Volumetric video surpasses that because it's not an animated interpretation of that actor. It's the photo real representation of that actor.
Thank you. So Roe, your company Tetavi is growing fast, building these volumetric studios around the world with partnerships in film and entertainment and sports, et cetera. Could you help us look under the hood of a typical volumetric video stage or shoot and describe some of those components and features?
Sure. I think you know, Piotr was very accurate in the way he described it. Eventually, the idea is that the way I think about it is if traditional video is a sequence of images, volumetric video is basically a sequence of 3D models. And we generate these sequences by capturing performances from multiple angles. The shoot itself is pretty straightforward, really. You just get into a stage, you give your performance, and this performance is being shot, you know, with multiple cameras. And then later, the real magic happens when you process it and stitch all this together. I think, you know, this is a really good example of how the final product is really greater than the sum of its components.
Yeah.
When you have a 3D representation of yourself, you know, it really opens up a new world of opportunities.
Yeah. Which we'll hopefully we'll explore some of those today.
Yeah.
Merchant, you represent kind of both the old school visual effects producer and now a volumetric video studio owner. And we know that volumetric video technology could capture the volume of a human so precisely, like 100% accuracy. What are some nuances for a performer when they're actually being captured volumetrically? Do they need to be directed? Just explain some of those nuances.
The main thing you want to do is get an authentic performance from an actor. And the volumetric video is the actual direct translation of an authentic performance, because you're not driving another character or an asset with mocap. You're actually yourself, which is the most important thing to an actor. And you do definitely want to direct them and have interactivity between the corresponding actor that they're reacting to. And the reason we think this technology is going to be really amazing during the COVID times and in future is that you can have an actor in Australia doing a performance with an actor in London, and we're getting the data and we're collecting the two files and putting them together in post in virtual production and creating an entire scene with it. So there's a lot of advantages to it, but also you have to get the performers used to performing individually by themselves and reacting to reactions from another person, which is not actually there. So yes, they have to be directed, and there's no tape or video, so you can do as many takes as you like. It's all digital data at that point. And so the flexibility is definitely there to allow the performers to give variants of performances and takes and allow them to express themselves in any and every way they want. And it's a really great tool for the director, because once you've captured a performance and you've realized that the person should have been looking a little here or there, you can actually go into Holo Edit and edit their gaze or the direction or the action, because out of Holo Edit, you have full control of the digital asset that's coming out.
Right. So I just want to make sure that everyone's clear that after you capture these assets, you can redirect them a million different ways, right? So speaking of the topic of talent, Boo, talent and working with digital replications is becoming timely. You know, it's kind of happening now. And for the Mill, one of, you know, Hollywood's top creative studios, are there any particular use cases, or what are you seeing in terms of the creative studios? What have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think also going a bit off of what, you know, Merchant said just now about the authenticity, right? Because when you look at, you know, there was an example in the clip before with Peyton Manning, you know, when you have, someone like that, and, you know, he wants to make sure that his performance is coming through really with authenticity, one-to-one, you know who you're looking at. It's not some awkward representation of him or interpretation. And you want the performance to come through. I think that, you know, this is why it is timely, because the technology now can do that. We couldn't do that before, but now we can. We can capture people at different stages in their lives, or just to or capture them individually to then maybe decide if you want to have a VR instance of it, or something that is associated with film. And obviously the connection with the talent is incredibly important because it's literally one-to-one. We had another project that isn't in the reel, but was with AT&T, where we actually volcapped a lot of real people who had to tell us about very difficult situations they had with distracted driving. Now, in that case, you never want to put them in a suit, make a cartoon representation of them. This is a very heartfelt, not even performance. This is their documentation of their experience. And in those cases, when you want to have that sort of natural, authentic, real person, it's critical to actually use vocab technology.
Okay, so now Duncan, I'm addressing you last because I wanted to first establish a foundation for the audience. What is the union's philosophy when new technology and media platforms present themselves?
Well, Matthew, I think it's been clear, not just recently, not just with the outbreak of new technology that we've been dealing with for the last couple of decades, but all the way back to the beginnings of television and even before that, that the right way to approach new technology is not to fight it. Fighting new technology doesn't work out well for the people who fight it. The key is for us to understand it, first of all, and then for us to adapt to it and to help it adapt to us so that the human element is retained and so that the people involved in the creation of things with this new technology are treated with respect and appropriately. And so that's what we've attempted to do. And this is our third Labor and Technology Innovation Summit, but this has been a consistent question and theme throughout the three that we've had so far, and even a long time before that, is how to do that. And part of that is making sure that there's appropriate philosophy and then also rules and regulations behind the use of the technology, and recognizing that technology can provide benefits as well as risks, and that it's easy to and understandable to be a little bit afraid about what technology is going to do, but that avoiding it, trying to fight it, that's not going to change the technology that comes down the path. You have to be smart about it, strategic about it, and make sure that you're putting the proper structures in place to protect people.
And to follow up on that, seeing how far this volumetric video technology has come, and more specifically, its capability to impact current and future employment, and reusing these digital human assets even for deceased performers. Are you thinking about building a consent framework around this?
Absolutely, and you've really hit on it. I think the two key elements for the use of this type of technology and a bunch of others are consent and appropriate compensation for that use. And I think you mentioned at the beginning in your introduction, Matthew, that this could provide opportunities for people to actually engage in additional work and be compensated for that work if the proper framework is built around it. And that's certainly something that we want to see. So we've begun that actually a while back in terms of establishing a clear policy on behalf of the union for our members about the use of digital scanning of all types, and making sure that when that's done with consent, and any use of it is done with consent and compensation. And I think that the details around those rules are going to have to be further developed as the technology develops, of course. But those core principles, I think, have been there and are going to be the basis of how we build the structures around this technology as it becomes more widely available and more widely used. If I would just like to add on to that, that all presumes, of course, that you're talking about responsible users of the technology, companies who are in the business to make legitimate product and want to cooperate with talent that are so important to them. There's also the element of unauthorized use of the technology. And, obviously there are other ways to address that. I know Gabrielle had mentioned deepfakes in her introduction earlier this morning, and I think they'll be talking about that later on. But for people who are outside that framework, there is a need to have legislation and other types of parameters to ensure that that philosophy is maintained across all of the ways in which this technology can be used.
Thank you. Thank you. So we know that there's a lot of noise, a lot of activity in the space around holograms and avatars and virtual humans, and it can all get very confusing. In fact, last year at CES, there was a company called Neon that was getting a tremendous amount of attention. And even just over the past couple of days, Epic announced a platform called the MetaHuman Creator. So Pio, let me ask you this. Let me start with you. First of all, if anyone knows what happened to Neon, and also maybe if you can demystify some of the differences between those platforms that are designer-centric as opposed to scanning real humans or objects.
Well, I mean, the easiest way to distinguish is just like you did right now. One is computer-driven and automatically artificial versus volumetric, which is photoreal and the real person. And to very quickly and maybe a little snarkily respond to like what happened to Neon, I could ask in return, well, have you seen Neon since CES last year? It is interesting. Certainly the tech that they presented at the time at CES looked like real people that you were able to have a conversation with, but it was a bit uncanny valley, and I think that that's still a significant hurdle for people to overcome, and that's why volumetric will lead the way. The difference between, I believe, that there will come a time where volumetric captures will merge with AI and be AI driven. So your performance, the natural language that you may use will be driven by AI, but will be a real person as opposed to an artificial one. Or I should say it can be a real person. I'm sure there will be a time and a place for artificial people, but the photoreal is really what is important to me.
Now, when you are volumetrically scanning or capturing a person, there's a tremendous amount of information that's also gathered in that data. Rowie, can you talk about that and how that data could be accessed and reused in future projects?
Sure. Really, I think that's what's great about volumetric video and about the platform we're building is really to be able to scale and monetize interactions with audience. First of all, we already mentioned the fact that this footage can be used for many different use cases and products. You can use the same footage for theatrical films, for advertisement, for games, for other use cases. And, the entire pipeline and the workflow is built in a way that not only this can be repurposed, it can also be reprocessed in the future to be able to meet future use cases. Now, interactions can be monetized as really this technology allows your audience to engage with your content or with your representation in really, new and exciting ways. You can imagine, for example, producing multi-language content on the fly, or transporting yourself into your audience's living room, for example. We recently did a project with the president of Israel that actually literally visited, virtually though, but visited all of the people in Israel to bless them for the Israel Independence Day.
Marcus, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, I think volumetric video is about to change the world in ways people haven't even thought about yet. The ability to transport yourself anywhere on the planet and be represented by yourself in your own entity is an incredible opportunity to expand the horizons of advertising, marketing, media. Since social media has become such a driving force behind the influence of the performers, imagine being able to transport yourself and be able to pose with your fans and to perform with your fans side by side and to be able to interact with your fans in real time on their devices and giving them the opportunity to be part of your universe. That is a phenomenal advent that Volumetric is going to provide to the entire advertising media and social media landscape.
Matthew, sorry, if I could jump in, because this is a part that's very exciting to me. And one of the things that I love about Volumetric is the opportunity to imagine a world where video can respond to its viewer. So when you have a volumetric performance, that captured video performance can respond in real time to the viewer. They can turn their head, they can look at you directly. They can hand you something. You can take something from them and hand it back. Like, of course, that's all digital, but imagine that world where you can enter a music video with your favorite performer and they hand you a glowing ball of light and you're able to hand it back to them. You can literally interact in any way with your fans, or fans can interact with that performer. It boggles the mind as to the opportunities that are out there.
And I see Duncan, busily taking notes on all of this because it's a lot to consider. Do you have any thoughts about all these cases?
Yeah, no, I think probably the most important thing, and it relates back to what we started with, is where you have that data saved, like Roy and Merchant were talking about. It's crucial that there's consent for that data being retained and for the use of that data. And of course, that there's compensation for new uses of that data. And I think that's been a framework that we have put out there from the beginning. So I feel like there's a good recognition of that in the industry, that's an important part. And I think it's also really interesting in what Piotr was just saying, that it's when that starts to track back towards the uncanny valley problem that I know you were referencing, isn't so much of an issue because it's actual, it's not a animated or computer animated recreation of a person. It's a person, it's their actual image. And so I'm wondering, do you feel like the direct interaction ever creates that issue, or does that, is that still solved by virtue of the fact that it's based on actual imagery?
In the experiences that we've built over the last few years, and I've worked with ad agencies and production companies on a variety of them, it still works because if you're able to plan for those interactions during the shoot, it makes the performer gives you those authentic reactions. That then gives you the opportunity to build out multiple versions of that performance in order for it to look natural when it's occurring later on. So yes, you are skipping that uncanny valley in this instance.
Right, and the key, sorry, just to follow up on that one point, I think that's a really key point. Just especially for the folks listening to this who might be thinking about it. So as you start to construct a larger performance with more nuanced reactions and things like that, there is a real difference there between a CGI character and something that's captured in volumetric in terms of adjustments and changes that are enabled, but a performance still being created. A real performance being created by virtue of the work done by the performer. And so I think it's important that we recognize that, because that is a key difference between the type of CGI performers that we've seen in the past, where uncanny valley has been a real problem, and what we're talking about here. But it's also could be a bit reassuring to performers that the human element of their performance isn't supplanted by the concept of volumetric video.
Right.
Yeah, and I think if I can just add to that really quickly, is like if you look at, if you kind of relate this to what we have had for a lot of years, which is if you have video, you can either play back that video, either separately because you shot them on green or married to their background. You can adapt that by changing their lip sync in post. Got a lot of history in that one. You know, but now you basically, if you have volumetric capture, you're capturing them in 360, so you can change their angle and all of that. You can either use it as is to keep it completely authentic to their performance. This is exactly what they said, no changes. It's true to what they did during that session. Or you can, you know, in the cases that we've brought up today, where you can modify their performance slightly. I think that, you know, even if you have the, we've taken into account that it's a photoreal video scan, basically, so you don't have that uncanny valley of look. You know that their features are in the right place, you know their eye sizes are right, and the space between the nose and the mouth is correct. But we have to also bear in mind that we can't then have uncanny valley in modifying their behavior. You know, if I'm making them gesture to things or adding additional animation to them, we do have to also keep in mind that there might be performance uncanny valley considerations that we haven't really come up against before, because we've always had animation and then we've had video, and now we're looking at marrying these two things. So it's just something to bear in mind with respect to the talent.
So now let's talk a little bit about a kind of a real use case. So we established that a person or an object can be volumetrically captured. A digital double is now preserved, archived. The assets actually that could generate a digital double can be archived and then can be exported for 1,000 possible applications. So if we look at let's just look at the Mills client, the Gatorade, as an example. And let's say a brand wants to build a promotional package now around that campaign. They need Peyton Manning for a few extra shots. We don't actually have to call him. We could go back into the archive, grab those raw volumetric video files. We could retarget his movements in post-production, and of course, compensate him for that reuse, depending on the negotiation. But let's just say now that there's a production company that wants to use Peyton's body and movements, but they don't make his, they make his likeness indistinguishable to avoid compensating him, kind of like a deep fake scenario. Kind of a technical question, but are there technical safeguards in place that could certify the authenticity of these files and maybe tie it back to the intellectual property holder?
I think that, I mean, these are, this is why we're doing this panel, because it's a really tricky question to ask and answer. I think that, from a technical point of view, I mean, I'm sure there are ways to basically, using visual compute, try to figure out if somebody's performance is one-to-one, have we then modified it and adapted it to something else? But I think that it's more about making sure, and this is, something that I can't speak to directly because that, in that example that you mentioned, we weren't involved in the negotiations for that. But this is why it's incredibly important that these contractual points are made to protect the performers and their performances specifically, because like once you start to adapt things, especially when it's so personalized, it gets very, very tricky. But yeah, I mean, technically, I'm sure there's a way to, figure that out. But it's uncharted territory.
Piotr, do you, I know at one point you were talking about watermarking and different ways to approach that.
There for sure will be a way to DRM all of this, that there will be a digital rights management tool that allows you to track your own capture. Those are all things that are in development today. They exist in one way, shape, or form now, but of course, with time, they will evolve and become much more robust and manageable.
Duncan, we know the pandemic has hit the industry kind of hard. where production costs are actually up 20, 30% due to pandemic precautions. Do you see where volumetric video can benefit production efficiencies in the future? Where do you see that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It could definitely benefit both from a safety perspective, from a performer and crew member safety perspective in terms of reducing the need to do reshoots or to have fewer people present at the same time on sets, et cetera. I think that is a potential real life benefit to cast and crew resulting from an increased use of this type of technology. Again, all of it within the framework of there being consent for that use and an appropriate compensation for that based on whatever the framework is that it's being used in. But I think that's kind of one of the exciting things about it is the ability to use that flexibility to help protect people. And right now in the pandemic, that's one great example. But I think even beyond the pandemic, hopefully someday soon we'll feel like we're beyond the pandemic. And that could be applicable for a number of other types of scenarios where there are safety considerations as well. So I think that's an exciting aspect of it.
So I was talking to an agency that represents a lot of musicians, post 60-year-old musicians. And there's something about volumetric video where you could actually capture people and preserve them at that current stage in their career. Just sort of like for the floor and the panel, in that case, how many times do you think we need to capture a talent over the course of their career? Should we be thinking about recapturing them 2-3 years later? Merchant, I will throw this to you.
I think capturing somebody every 10 years and archiving them and managing and maintaining their scans and their volumetric captures is a very important thing, because think of prosperity. The estate could live, the IP could live on forever in posterity. There's no limitation to how long you can use it. And as technology and the display technology and the projection technology for taking these 3D volumetric videos and playing them back in real time in your living room and having a memory of somebody or a performance that you saw of Shakespeare 25 years ago is now being rebroadcast in your living room, on your dining table, or in an area that you can watch it in 3D and be part of it, be within the scene. Those are the kind of advents that we're looking forward to, and that's what's going to change the way entertainment occurs.
Can I actually, we had a recent example actually where I would actually accelerate that to say every time you have a significant hairstyle change, because we literally had a case where a talent was used in one project for a brand, and then a few months later showed up for additional add-on to the campaign, and the hair wasn't quite the same. It was a big deal. So we might need to do it in more frequency than every 10 years.
But can I jump in to say, I think it raises even more interesting issues about the long-term use of these scans and their use, for purposes that weren't originally intended when the scans were captured, and what that means for consent. I refer everyone to the example in season 5 of Black Mirror, the Ashley O episode. If anyone hasn't seen that, I recommend it, where a similar type of technology was used to supplant a real life person in that example. I think that's something we probably don't have to worry too much about at the current point, but it is, I think, really important to establish the right of the person themselves to control what happens with that use of their image, even after their death, and to really designate who will be entitled to exercise that control on a long-term basis, because there's something uniquely personal about having the ability to put someone into that situation, and those rights really need to be protected, both contractually, which is certainly part of what we're doing, and also statutorily, which is another part of what we're doing.
So let's jump 10, 20 years forward. And let's assume that we're working out all of the consent and the conditions around this. How could this industry look? I mean, could this really be the game changer that we think it can be? Does anyone have want to talk about any particular kind of technology that they have that is even taking it one step further?
I think it all relates to, that brings me back to, I wanted to refer to, this conversation around security. And I think that, should really scale as we keep moving forward with this technology. And I think that's very relevant to what things are going to look like in 10 years. Really, the reason why we build, a platform for immersive social entertainment is really in order to be able to scale this technology. In order for this tech to move forward, there's really eventually a lot of aspects you need to take into consideration. You need to deal with the capture and the editing and transmission and distribution and archiving, and they all need to work together in order to scale. So you really need to have, end-to-end solutions, like you see with other technologies. Now, I believe that as the world around us is changing, this is really an opportunity to redefine the aspects that we are not happy with at the moment with current social platforms and video ecosystems. This is really an opportunity to make technology less intrusive, but also to keep it as immersive and engaging as it is today, and even more. It is an opportunity to fight the misuse of content, to sanctify, if you would, authenticity. So, as we build the world's largest library of real people, and this library keeps growing, you can imagine what it would look like in 10 years from now. Security is not only a consideration. I think, it's really one of the aspects that drive all of us, I think, to do the work that we do.
I think also, if you're talking about 10 years from now, we have to also consider the platforms that our audience will be on. Are they going to be watching TV? Are they going to be watching their phones? Are they going to be wearing, AR devices on their faces? Or are they going to even have, brain machine interfaces, right? So, and then once it gets more into content experiences within a space and not just on a flat screen, volume capture becomes more and more important, because how I look at things on my table and I'm not on a flat screen, having that 360 representation of a performance of any talent, any individual, is going to be critical. So I think that this is why this is so important, because we have to recognize the platform that people are going to be experiencing content, entertainment, all of that on.
Yeah, and I just want to say that the thing about volumetric video, because it is so accurate, and it is, it is almost like the DNA of a person or an object. It becomes a little less about what that platform, that delivery platform is, right? Because you have those assets could be updated, the technology could be updated, and you now have this sort of bank that you can pull these assets from, and of course compensate it correctly, but use it for a lot of different platforms. So it becomes kind of ubiquitous.
The other thing that I think is really important for us to remember is that as this technology gets applied to larger, more substantial types of productions, that when you really think about it, a lot of the most compelling content has to do with the connection between people, right? It's not just one person by themselves doing a monologue. It's about performers in particular interacting and creating that compelling story that people want to watch, that rivets our attention. And so one of the challenges that I see with the technology moving forward is how you do that, how you take larger stories with more participants and use volumetric video to capture them without starting to move into the uncanny valley area, where you start to have interactions that are close to real, but not close enough so that they are desirable. Because one of the things, the uncanny valley stuff is, the closer you get without getting there, the more sort of icky it is to people. That's why people don't like it. And so it seems to me that volumetric has a lot of potential, but probably in some way that allows the performers to truly connect with each other as they're creating that performance, and then giving all the benefits of volumetric, but without creating that artificial type of interaction that's kind of the hallmark of a lot of the other types of technology where those performances have been artificially created or combined in a non-realistic way.
Yeah. So I want to say that since I've been working in volumetric video and tracking it, studios have been popping up all around the world. I know Tetavi has a lot of those systems, or a lot of systems. And Piotr's company, Arcturus, actually tracks a lot of the growth with these volumetric video studios. So it is popping up. So is there any particular training? How does somebody learn how to work and operate with volumetric video tools? Merchant, you have a...
I think the simplest answer for that is working in a volumetric studio, because there is no educational guideline or a facility where you can go and learn that. But hopefully within the next 3 months, we're going to try and rectify that and have a facility in Los Angeles where you can do virtual production, XR production, volumetric production, and understanding the workflows and the technology and use cases. And that's the only way currently. And there's obviously YouTube videos. Everybody's got at least a few hundred videos out there. But I think it's going to take a little bit of time for education institutes to understand that this is a technology that's available. It's going to become mainstream in the next few years. And then to take that and deploy a curriculum and a training school for that is very important. And with Tetavi, we are in discussions about building a facility here in LA, which will allow everybody to come and train and learn multiple different disciplines in virtual production, motion capture, volumetric video, and XR, MR, AR. I think hopefully we'll be able to get that up and running soon.
I think, sorry, go ahead, Roy. Well, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, from an actor's perspective, and volumetric video, like the capture that you're getting, because it is 360 and it is photoreal, it is about the nuance of your performance. And that is what is so beautiful about volumetric video. And, in terms of training, it is the training that you're already doing, but with the addition that your performance is being captured in 360. Like, it's not just, oh, like, where's my camera, or where's the camera and where's the light? That limitation is now gone. And you're able to really capitalize on an entire 360 performance of what you want to communicate, rather than just where's my camera and where's my light.
And the other thing about volumetric video is amazing is that you can take it into a game engine like Unreal or Unity and relight the actor, reposition the actor, reorient their gaze. There's so much flexibility. Traditionally, if you went out on a location and shot the golden hour, you'd basically be there for 15 minutes at 7 in the morning and 4 in the evening. Whereas in virtual, we can do it anytime we like. We want day, night, sky, starry sky. You want a bright storm, it's all possible. And to relight the actor with those enhancements and making them feel that they're in that environment, that is a key critical piece that has just made life so much easier in these times.
I wanted to add that, the way I see it, this is really just the beginning. You're going to see, this technology growing and scaling to, new levels, and accessibility is really key in order for that to happen. So, you saw some examples. I'm going back to the video you guys saw in the beginning. using green screen and using some intrusive tech. Really, we're now in a day that these things are not required anymore. We have portable solutions. These productions can be much, much easier and simpler to set up. In the near future, you will be seeing new consumer-facing solutions as well. And once we get there, you can think of it the same way as we think about video today. We're going to have the big studios managing professional productions, using professional solutions. But on the other hand, you have tools that are accessible to consumers, to everyday users, to be able to really produce immersive content at home.
Great. We have about time for questions, about 8 more minutes. This has been fantastic and interesting panel. I want to thank everybody. Question, with technology moving at such a rapid pace, how do we ensure that the laws are kept up? Duncan, I guess that's for you.
Well, it's a lot of work. It's a constant focus. Honestly, from a SAG-AFTRA point of view, we have an amazing government affairs and public policy committee of members and staff department as well, of people who are really focused on these issues and how they affect our members and actually others. There's a lot of work we've done that benefits even people outside of our membership, future members and just people in general. So we are focused very much on how to protect image rights. We have a whole digital image rights campaign. We've enacted legislation successfully in California, New York, and other places around the country to address that. And I'll just put in a plug for the Beijing Treaty on the Protection of Audiovisual Performances, which is an international treaty to help protect image rights, among other things. It's been ratified by more than 30 countries. The US hasn't ratified it yet, but I'm hoping we will soon. And so there's just it's a constant battle. It's a constant effort, but I think with the kind of consensus that I've seen in this panel today and with a lot of people around the world about wanting to help people protect their image rights and just protect their right to control the use of their face, their likeness, their voice, I feel like we have a lot of support for making sure that the right protections are in place.
Here's a question which is talking about casting, and maybe Boo, you can jump in on this. Do you see where these, representations could be interesting for casting purposes?
I think that especially this year, I think that could be really interesting. In particular, and also, as we, and even beyond this year, it's like you were talking about global casting purposes, how many tapes, sorry, in the old days, but anyway, have you seen, right? And it's like to be able to run sessions that are, you actually see the entire performance. And that you don't, and these are pros and cons to this as well. You don't have to necessarily play to camera, because where's your camera? So, but I think that it really does unlock a lot of things. Assuming that we can have enough of these the capture pods, for lack of a better word, distributed everywhere, I think that this can really open things up.
Yeah, we just had sorry, Matt. We just had a conversation with Elite Modeling Agency where we're talking about discussing of scanning their entire catalog of models. So they don't have to travel the world, that you basically are able to send an any AR app, which is a laptop, iPad, phone, and you're able to have the model right there in front of you in your selection and be able to get it all done really quickly and not have to have the model travel everywhere.
I want to thank everybody on this panel. It's been awesome. It's an incredible medium. We're very excited. We're excited that SAG-AFTRA is understanding, is learning, and is building rules around it. I want to thank you, Gabrielle, for having us. And please, we're here to support. Please reach out through me if you want anytime.